There are only a handful of video games that feel like they really understand how to portray mental illness, and even amongst them, few can compare to the depth of suffering and struggle depicted in Milk Inside a Bag of Milk, Inside a Bag of Milk. In this video, I'll be going over the events of the game, while also analyzing the little details that I think really make this game so good at what it does. Spoiler warning for the game, and a warning for the topics of today's video: mental illness and the experience of being neurodivergent. Also minor appearances of death and abuse. Despite the strange title, the game has a really straightforward premise. A girl must buy milk from the store, and you are here to help her do it. You are first introduced to her as she's walking down the road, rehearsing her speech. She tells you that it's been so long that she forgot what words to say when entering a store. When you ask her who she's talking to, she responds that she's imagining as if she were a character in a game. She does this in order to help her gather her thoughts. Then she tries to say it. Hello? Can I? Crap, I forgot. This is her 19th attempt at forming the words together. Immediately, we can see that this girl has trouble talking to others, perhaps extreme social anxiety. Alternatively, it could be that she just isn't experienced, but the fact that she is trying to calm herself down by pretending to be a game character points more to the idea that this girl is afraid. This is a great introduction to the girl's psychology. She overthinks everything. The mundaneness of the task is also a great showcase of the fact that mental illness doesn't just appear for big scary events. It's a pervasive and debilitating fact of life. Continuing on, for the 20th attempt, she manages to say, "Hello, can I get?" a whole word more. You suggest to her that maybe it's because this time the L sound was longer than usual, and she tries it. "Hello, can I?" Well, that wasn't it. This speech rehearsal doesn't last for much longer though, as more pressing matters need to be brought to her attention. By the way, you've been walking with your left foot on the pavement and the right on the grass for a full minute now. In response, she screams out in shock and asks for how long. 50 steps on the pavement and 51 on the grass. She must undo the previous step for some reason. My best guess is that so the number of steps on each side is even. With this task at hand, she's ready to burst into tears. I think that something like this perfectly captures the feeling of something like OCD or autism. How many steps one has taken on the grass or the sidewalk is hardly something a typical person would ever count, much less care if it is even. Plus, the number was never her problem. It was the fact that she was doing it in the first place. A typical person would just step to the side to get back on the sidewalk. The need to even out the steps is bizarre, but important to her. You try to instruct her on how to put her foot back to the previous step, but she doesn't get it. She needs you to rephrase it. What I find the most interesting about this is that it's obvious by now that you're just a figment of her imagination. She doesn't even understand what her own mind is trying to say to her, a great representation of cognitive dysfunction. In the end, you have to encourage her to press on. You tell her she will be guilty if she doesn't buy the milk. Another detail that is important here is that you use a negative emotion to motivate her. It is typical for mentally ill individuals to use negative feelings to push themselves rather than positive motivation. Finally entering the store, she turns to the first person that she sees, which then starts a strange interaction that runs in a circle. He says, "Oh," she says, "What?" Back and forth. "Oh, what? Oh, what?" She tells you that he's trying to scare her, but how does he know that she's afraid of the letter O? When you ask her what's so scary about it, she says that it's a frightening picture in her head. She can show you, since explaining it won't be enough, but keep in mind that it'll cost her a dozen nerve cells. She then briefly shows you the image. It's a hole in the sky, dark and encompassing. Back to the conversation, she finally gathers all her courage and says, "Oh." He replies, "Oh," with an exclamation point, and then goes away. All it took was repeating what he said. "You should probably do this more often," you say to her. This interaction has a lot of layers to it. I personally think that the letter O is simply a greeting, a friendly hello of some kind. The fact that it is an O may symbolize how communication is difficult and foreign for someone with extreme social anxiety. It may also be symbolic of the social circle, hence the O. In any case, a greeting is not quite complete until both parties reciprocate the same thing, which could explain why he goes away as soon as she repeats it to him. With the mysterious figure out of the way, you head to the shelves with the bags of milk. There, she comments, "We both stand," and the milk lies, or maybe... You remind her to slow down and remember why she's here. To buy milk, of course. "Here?" she asks. Your response to her question is of confusion. What do you want me to say? Something like, "Not here." So you tell her, "Not here. Take the bag and go to the register." She ends this interaction by saying, "I guessed the first sentence," and as if out of spite, you didn't pause before the next sentence. "You want to rob me of my little victories." What I find most interesting about this interaction is that she was able to guess what her inner consciousness wants her to do. She knows that she doesn't buy it at the shelf, but she still needs someone to tell it to her. Now, with milk in hand, she asks the cashier, "Can I get some milk, please?" Their response is harsh, or at least appears like that to her. "You have it. Give." "Can I have it?" "No." "Please. Mom will throw me out the window if I come back without milk." "No." "Why not?" "Give more." This is more than she can take, and you must step in to remind her that she just needs to pay for it. When she hands the money over, the cashier accepts it and bags the milk. Outside, she notices that she's carrying a bag of milk in another bag and remarks about the pyramidal structure of verbal constructions. You ask her how she's feeling, and she responds that she feels like a mile-long bar of ice cream. What? She then talks about the ratio of milk to water in the space she occupies, and something else that makes no sense. It's simple math. If it wasn't clear already, we can also get a pretty good idea that she doesn't just have anxiety or some curable mental illness. She also thinks and behaves in quite a neurodivergent way. Then suddenly, you tell her to watch out. She steps to the side and a bear rushes past. Red eyes stare at her. Except, it's not really a bear. It was a truck, and she could have died. She denies that someone would do that. Why would anyone want to hit a girl carrying milk? If you say that the world is cruel and dangerous, she says that she's not in the world that you're talking about. Next is a section at a crosswalk. She reflects about how she feels the world adjusts to her in weird ways. When she's in a hurry, all the traffic lights turn off helpfully. When she feels like crying, a cloud appears over her and pours rain streams that hide her tears. In response, you ask her if this is really happening. Then, you have the opportunity to hit her with a reality check. Has it ever occurred to you that it's all in your head? She tries to deflect this by talking about her pills. You tell her it has nothing to do with her pills. Now, she's begging. "Please, I just want to get home and go to bed. I really am grateful to you, but I just want to get home." Now, before you lies a choice. Tell her to accept the truth, or acknowledge her wishes and drop the subject. If you continue to push on, you fail the game. You're not helpful. Not one bit. This was my first and only non-intentional fail in my playthrough. You can fail at other times too by being mean to her, but this time I felt as if I was choosing the right dialogue option. I desperately wished that she could see that it actually is all in her head. But I think the game is trying to tell us that she knows, but isn't ready to confront that all at once. She can barely buy milk. You can't ask too much of her. This is quite an impactful scene to me. It made me stop and reflect upon just how different I am from this character, and how difficult it is to help someone with mental health issues. On the other hand, if you stay quiet as she wishes, she decides to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with the person reading this, referencing back to the idea that she's pretending to be a visual novel character. I realize that I'm becoming crazy. The medications are becoming less and less effective. Ultimately, I hope that things will happen painlessly. She then asks if you understand her. You must type in yes for her to continue. She talks about how she's not the model protagonist, and how she hasn't read many visual novels. She regrets it, because now it costs her a lot of effort just to distinguish between letters and words. She also says that she doesn't want to name her diagnosis, and wants you to see her for who she is. Even though she made you up, don't take that away from her. This scene was beautifully written. I think that this is relatable to almost everyone with some sort of condition. To have accepted that you know something is wrong with you, but still want to be seen as a person, not as your flaws. She then talks about what it's like to see the world through her eyes. Ever since it happened, all she sees is red. What happened to her, you may ask? She answers this by showing you her dad, or at least some of his parts. She reflects upon how she has a difficult family, but she never would have thought that this would happen. He jumped out of the window and died. It was her last memory, and then a long gap. In spite of this sad scene, she seems happy, because today is the first time in a long time she bought something without major incident. Today is a special day, because she has you. And with that, it's time to go home. As she goes to her apartment, which is on a high floor, she hangs over the railing. She says that in repeating this action every day, she has stopped being afraid of heights. And since the medicine wore off, she can enjoy the silence. When she is under the influence of the medicine, her mind makes terrible dissonance sounds. Finally entering the apartment, her mom appears. "Did you bring the milk?" She tries to say hi to her mom, but is met with the same question again. "Did you bring the milk?" "Yes, Mom." "Did your new medicine help?" "Yes, Mom." "Go to bed." "Yes, Mom." And there ends the game. The mom doesn't seem terribly warm or comforting, as you would expect of a mom, likely contributing a lot to the illness felt by the character. The fact that her mom wouldn't say hi to her is also likely being the source of that sentiment about wanting to be seen as a person and not just her illnesses. In the end, we're not hit with some triumphant return. We've completed the task, and the day is done. This game had one of the best depictions of mental illness and being neurodivergent that I've ever seen. The sadness and struggle is palpable. The story, although short, has so many details that tell a complex story of this girl. It's no wonder that this game has a cult following. In fact, it has another game, a sequel that picks up exactly where we left off in this game. I felt that covering the story of that game as well would make the video far too long. The second game has a depth that could take an hour to talk about. As far as takeaways we can get from this game, the most striking that I had was the message that mental illness is incredibly complex. This character's sadness is deep. Nothing we could say at this moment can do anything more than help her keep going little by little. If you try to make her take a big leap, she freaks out and says that you're no help. Mental health isn't something that you can work through in a day. You must struggle through it. I also feel as though a lot can be said about socioeconomic conditions. Neurodivergence and mental illness both don't get enough resources to be effectively dealt with. Many must struggle through these things alone, without the necessary support. As much as we could label the mother as being abusive and not supportive of her daughter, we could also extend grace and see that her husband has died. She must bear the burden of taking care of her daughter alone, likely without any support. Her apathy may be a result of exhaustion and her own trauma. not to excuse her actions, but rather to provide an explanation. Tackling mental illness and providing accommodations for neurodivergence is not just the effort of those affected. It takes society as a whole to provide these resources. We must take action. However unlikely, I hope that someday we can look back on games like this, like how we look at artifacts in history museums. And with that, I think I've said all I have to say about this game. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. Also, thank you to our first Patreon member. I truly appreciate the support, and if you would also like to support the channel, the link to our Patreon is in the description. Thank you, and see you next week.